but we'll see. Right, are we ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Right. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Mental Health Staff Hour, a new mini-series, a 4-part series, bringing you topics such as today's, taking notice, adapting to change, resilience, and bereavement, especially around losing people to COVID. So really excited to bring this webinar to you today. We're joined by 2 brilliant guests, and I'm really looking forward to introducing them shortly. So if you are new to these webinars, this is basically off the back of a webinar series that myself and Dave, the co-host, have done for the last year called the Mental Health Family Hour. And today's is focusing on taking notice, all for staff, whether you're an NHS worker, local authorities, education, third sector organisations. This is for you because you've done some fantastic work this last year, and I know how difficult it's been. So I really do hope that these webinars do help you. So who am I? So my name's Sam Tyrer. I'm the Prevention and Engagement Lead at Lancashire and South Cumbria Foundation Trust. I'm also the founder of an educational service called Change Talks, which is basically an educational program delivered to 11 to 21-year-olds with the key aim to prevent ill health. And I'm also the co-host of this show. So Dave.
Well, obviously, I'm the other co-host of this show, and when we've got guests, and especially when we're live, I mainly work as a bit of a producer. So we have got a live chat today. If anyone wants to talk along and ask questions and stuff, or just comment, I will be monitoring that a lot. But other than that, I am the owner of this YouTube channel that we're on, a content creator, someone who lives with his own mental health issues as well. I have type 2 bipolar disorder. And I'm someone who wants to help not just awareness, but education around mental health.
And Dave's the one with the fancy background out with all as well. So.
Well, I'm on camera all the time.
Yeah. If anyone does want to ask any questions afterwards, then please feel free to email me on sam.tyrer, so that's Tyrer, @lscft.nhs.uk. So now to introduce our wonderful guests. I'm just going to go across my screen, and first up is David. Could I ask you just to give a brief introduction about yourself, please?
Hi everyone. Yes, thank you very much, Sam. My name's David Rogers. I work in the NHS. I'm a head of communications and engagement for the CCGs in Pennine, Lancashire. In my spare time, I'm a yoga teacher. I've been practicing yoga for about 40 years, hence the grey hair. I've been teaching yoga for about 10 years. Pre-COVID, did classes all around Pennine, Lancashire. Loved that. During COVID, do online classes, and that's whether it's a class or a one-to-one. And I love yoga, obsessed about it, and I want more and more people to do yoga. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you, David. And Saxy.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sam and Dave, for inviting us on this program. I'm Sakti Karunanidhi. I work in Lancashire in the public health team, and in my spare time, I have also practiced yoga for some years now, and I started to realize that there is something very common across many sort of traditional community-based folklore and practices that has got a direct relationship with taking notice and living a healthy and a peaceful life. So as much as I'm here as a public health specialist, I'm also here to share my personal experiences and tips so that staff, particularly our staff that have worked so hard during the last year, but hopefully it will be useful for a lot more people as well in taking notice and living well.
Perfect, thanks, Sakti. So to start us off, I just like to touch on the challenges that we've faced throughout this lockdown and before lockdown, and the impact that that's had on people's mental health. You know, I reflect back on my time as a staff nurse, and I used to feel really anxious at times about going to work due to lack of staffing or any issues like that. But COVID especially has caused a variety of different issues in regards to staff's well-being. You know, that could be down to PTSD or anything like that. Could you just sort of touch on that and the challenges that you've seen staff face throughout this lockdown and beforehand as well? David or Sakti, either of you can start with that.
Sakti, do you want to start first? You've been right in the front of this, I think.
Thank you for that. I mean, staff speaking, people in the NHS, people in public services, And also, people generally in the working age, we spend quite a lot of time at work. And even before COVID, the way that the world's been changing meant that there's quite a lot going on in our lives. And we bring that to work, and whatever is happening at work, we take it back home. And COVID has meant, on top of all of that, the entire life's been changed from the way we work, working from home, many people, maybe feeling very isolated and removed from their colleagues, but also generally the way of life has been completely turned inside out, from the way we shop, from the way we meet our friends and so on. So COVID has certainly put an additional emotional weight or burden on all our lives, and it really is important to recognize that and do something about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us carry a lot of stuff in our heads all the time. It's there. And I think that's very human. That's very natural. That's just the way we are, with the way we've evolved. I think COVID's magnified that. It's put a magnifying glass onto the good stuff, but also the not so good stuff. And I think the stuff that we carry in our heads has been further cluttered, as Sakti says, with all of this other stuff called COVID. The changes in our routines, working from home, the kind of retail therapy that people now do, the online emphasis that's disconnected us, a lot of us. And I think that's very, very challenging for so many people. So we've got this double whammy, double jeopardy of the usual clutter, the usual stuff that's going on, and then the stuff of COVID. And that's further magnified, I feel, by this new thing we've got called hope. We've now got the vaccination program. We're seeing the figures go down. But there are an awful lot of people who are kind of caught in an uncertain state, particularly if you're in the NHS. Is it going down? Are things going to get better? And I think that exacerbates that. So, yeah, absolutely. We're dealing with a lot of internal clutter as much as a lot of external chaos, I think.
And do you both think that staff are sort of forgetting to slow down? Because me personally, I found that over this last year, that any sort of spare time I have in my work calendar, there's a meeting put in. So everything is back to back. So actually, I'm never really getting that moment to slow down, to take some time for myself, because it's a Teams call after Teams call after Teams call. And then you get home, you've got your personal stuff to deal with. And do you think that staff are actually just forgetting to take notice and just to slow down that tiny bit? Sorry, Sakti, go on.
No, you're quite right. The perils of working from home and online, however convenient and easier it has become, it has also come with, like you were saying, Sam, back-to-back meetings, hardly any time to actually recoup from previous meetings and go into the next ones. And also we are chasing quite a lot of work as well during the time we've got. And if we don't take notice of that, not only it's going to sort of wear us down mentally and emotionally, but it is going to affect our thinking and our decision making and eventually also physical health. So I think it's really, really important we take the time to basically notice what's changing around us, but also take the time to notice what's happening inside us. We quite often attach ourselves in our attention to what's outside, but there are things that actually are happening inside us as well. And taking notice is actually scientifically shown to improve the levels of, or to address the levels of anxiety and worries people might have, as well as take control of how we want to lead our lives going forward.
I would like to add to that, because I think when we were all at work in a normal, inverted commas, working situation, we kind of had routines that enabled us to have buffers. Yeah. So you talked about back to back. I've heard of people saying, I don't have that drive home now where I could decompress. So literally I go from work to the family without decompressing, or the work. And if you've got young children at home who are at school and you've got homeschooling or you've had that, that's another dimension. So the decompression quality that we had has slightly gone, and we have to build that in, I think. So what Sact is saying about noticing how we are is really, really crucial for that, to build in those buffers. And it really takes a lot of self-discipline to say, I'm going to put a timer on my calendar to say, I'm going to go out for a walk, or I'm going to, after this meeting, I'm just going to sit quietly and just attend to how I feel, as Sakti said. As I mentioned, there's a lot of clutter in our heads, I think. And I speak for myself. I'm human. I go on a meeting and I have some actions, I have some thoughts, I have some feelings, and I have to somehow work that through. And we're not in a therapeutic context here, but actually we do need some way of just processing every interaction. And when we were chatting to someone in the kitchen, or we were chatting in the car park on the way back from a meeting, that enabled us to process and decompress, and we just haven't got that. So we've got to work very consciously to build that in.
Why do you think people are not taking them moments in the day? Do you think it's a sense of guilt for not appearing like they're online? Because I know from having spoke to a lot of staff, they feel that it needs to say that they're online all the time. So they may feel guilty for taking, 5 minutes just to have a quick coffee and just to switch off. What would you say about that?
I mean, we're talking about the NHS and also social care and other public services. People who work generally in the public service, I think, have really good will, good intention, and want to do the best that they can. That's a fantastic motivation to give service, but actually it means that you're continuously kept in that loop. So whether it's guilt or just like the constant desire to do service, I think that plays a part. I don't know what you think, Sakti, but I think that...
Yeah, no, you're right, David. And I just wanted to highlight that it's not just people who are working from home and working online. It's also people who aren't working online and from home, but actually at the front line looking after they are, as we know, they are here in the NHS and in public service because they want to serve. And given the workload that has been really increasing in the last year, certainly has increased as a result of the pandemic, I think we have gone onto a bit of an overdrive because of our zeal to serve, to the point of almost at risk of forgetting that we need to keep well to serve well. And that's I think, is one of the real issues that we really need to address, not just in the NHS and public services, but generally in the economy. There's a lot of people that have worries and they are anxious about the future and so on. So this is a really, really important moment in time during this pandemic, as we are reaching the anniversary of a year and so on. It is important to take a moment, look after ourselves to serve well, to serve others well.
I think this flows nicely into our next point, just about how people can relax. And if we can talk about meditation, relaxation, and if you can also, I know you've both mentioned about yoga, could you tell us about the science of yoga, please? Either of yourselves can go first again.
Okay.
It's a very broad question.
Well, basically, starting with taking notice as a concept, there are lots of research, particularly in the last 20 years, that have really shown non-medical ways of well-being, of keeping ourselves well, that has really been linked to addressing anxiety, low-level anxiety, depression, and basically mind-wandering and rumination of all these issues. And there has been a lot of studies that show if you pay attention, take notice, you could do it with nature, go for a walk, or with everyday things, but more importantly, take notice of your own self, your own body, your own mind, and your values, and all of that. It's clearly linked to anxiety, reduced levels of anxiety, low-level depression, and so on. The second part, staying with taking notice, is it improves the self-awareness and self-worth and the self-uniqueness, and therefore the self-determination, and take a bit of charge of our own self and how we behave and how we lead our lives and so on. So that is the mental, emotional aspects of yoga. And there are practices like, breath techniques and so on. But as you go beyond the contemplative aspects, there are real benefits in terms of musculoskeletal. You don't have to, especially in the lockdown and so on, you don't have to rely on other equipment, but on your own self to keep your major joints moving well and your balance well and so on, which is your musculoskeletal benefit. The other aspect is, which is phenomenal if you step back and think about it, the effects of yoga on our autonomous nervous system.
Yeah.
Autonomous nervous system is your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, which are largely thought about as automatic. So you can't really control. And that's why they're called autonomous. It's the way the heart beats, the respiration happens, and the enzymes flow, and so on. But there are some really interesting studies that link some of the breath practices with vagal nerve stimulation, for instance, which is directly linked with your heart rate variability and impact on blood pressure and generally well-being of almost all systems in our body. So we can go on and on about it, but in summary, it's got positive benefits on your musculoskeletal system and our self-regulation and emotional awareness, and even the way that we think and make decisions in our everyday lives, but also that self-awareness and self-regulation and so on. And there are wider benefits. Scientific studies are harder to conduct in this domain, but linked with spirituality and how you connect with what's around you and so on, which is all about how well one feels and how well one can lead your life. So that's, in summary, some of the scientific domains with yoga.
That for me was one of the Sakti's summed it up beautifully. But I came to yoga because I had, for want of a better word, mental health problems when I was a teenager, and I knew I needed to relax. I was a people pleaser, and I kind of wanted to please, and I wanted to make life easy and everyone be happy. Actually, I ended up kind of like really creating anxiety in myself. So I came to yoga for that reason. My mum did it at Adult Education Centre, and I then learned from her and then took on a more kind of practical turn of practice. Then probably in the last 10 years, and Sakti, I don't know if you would agree with me, there's been more science, more research, the emerging evidence is growing of the benefits of yoga, of regulation of breath. And for me, the big eye-opener was this recognition of the impact on the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. So for me, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a medic. The sympathetic system is the system that helps us fight, flight, freeze, react. The parasympathetic, I think about paralyzed, is the relaxation response. And there's some very, very powerful things you can do to really unleash the power of this autonomic nervous system. And the first thing is the breath, as Sakti said. And I like to think of your inhalation when you breathe in is like an accelerator. You're pressing on the accelerator, that works on the sympathetic system. When you exhale, it's more like a bit of a brake. I'm hoping that Sakti will agree with me. This is how I characterize this. But actually, what we notice for a lot of people is that they start breathing when they're stressed, and actually they add to the stress. And, deep breaths, and they start hyperventilating. that's great because it kind of puts you in a state of heightened awareness and readiness to fight, flight, or freeze, as the science would say, but it doesn't necessarily relax you. So exhaling puts the brake on all that, enables you to kind of relax more. But, and as Sakti said, the really important thing is the attention. So the science says when you attend to your mind and to your breath, you begin to create a sense of focus. Now, what happens is, I think a lot of people tend to get very stressed. I know it myself, so my touchstone is my own experience. I'll reach for chocolate. I will reach for wine. I will look at rubbish TV. Netflix has been great for that. But actually, the best thing in the world is to attend, as Sakti says, to yourself. So find, and we'll probably come on to this, but actually finding some sort of quiet space and just observing your mind, observing your breath, and really accessing that kind of relaxation response, which, as Sakti has said, science really backs up now. There's a growing amount of evidence on that.
Can I just jump in with one thing as well, that from people I've worked with on this, they've found that, especially when anxiety is in play, the person becomes to believe that they are out of control and they cannot control anything. And with the breath, it's one thing that actually links us. You know, we obviously look at the autonomic nervous system and we think it's automated. It's not automated, but the breath is like our gateway to it, because we might not be able to directly say, right, well, I want my heart rate to be 62 beats per minute right now. But if we actually start by controlling our breath, even if it's that making it a split second longer each time, then we're actually no, I can control this. I can take a little bit more breath. It might be a small portion. I might not be able to manage the same breath that these guys on YouTube are talking about right now. An 8-second exhale might be impossible for me, but I can go from a 2-second exhale to a 3-second exhale. And that then shows to the person, it's a proof of concept around the idea that they have control. And once you realize you can control that, you do realize that you can actually control other parts of that as well, with that being the gateway to get there.
So a lot of the yoga texts, my tradition is mainly Tibetan yoga, but the Hatha yoga tradition, they talk about the breath being like, the mind being like, let me get this right, Sakti, it's kind of like the mind's an unruly horse, and we need to harness the horse. The thoughts are like galloping away with us, but actually the way to harness the thoughts are with the breath. The breath acts as the harness. So absolutely right. So the science says this, and the history of yoga repeatedly says this: harness the breath, harness the thoughts.
So from what you've all said there, especially focusing on breathing, it's not actually very time consuming at all. But there may be people watching that actually think to themselves, I can't fit in doing yoga. You know, I'm so busy at the moment. What would you say to these individuals? I'm trying to play devil's advocate.
Yeah. Yoga isn't about rolling up your yoga mat on a Wednesday evening and booking a gym session for 2 hours and changing to your lycra, and you just do it, once a week, and it's kind of a fad. Although there is quite a bit of uprise in the practice of yoga, largely people attach yoga to that kind of activity that requires quite a lot of preparation and quite a lot of resources invested, or people have this presumption or an assumption that it's all linked to religion, and it's something that is, if you're an atheist, you shouldn't be believing in it. But actually, if you just observe people who are maybe anxious or even angry, even when we're ourselves angry, our breath goes up and down. It increases. I'd say this: just sit, relax, keep your back straight. Just try for 30 seconds. Just when you breathe in, you bring your mind with the breath into your head, and as you breathe out, just let it go through your knees and toes. Just practice that for 10 seconds. Slow and steady. You can start to feel a bit of a calm. And by the way, by that time, your heart rate change for better. So it's as simple as that. We can go into the details, and I'm really interested in sharing some of these very practical tips to our staff in my spare time, that is.
So literally you can do that at any moment throughout the day, can't you? Just take 30 seconds.
Any moment. I think we can do it at the start of every meeting.
Yeah,
and everybody's around. 30 seconds or a minute.
Yeah.
Just compose ourselves.
I've just done it then.
I was going to say,
I feel like I couldn't hear you. We're done.
well, especially on Zoom meetings, because there can only ever be one voice in a Zoom meeting, can't there? Because it takes over the audio feed. And I actually practice this when we're doing these anyway. So I'll sit here and pay attention to my breathing, because I know that when I'm talking, I'm definitely not doing that. So when everyone else is talking, I use that as an opportunity to actually focus on my breath. And it's not something that's so much of a focus that it stops you from being able to focus on what the people are saying as well. So yeah, bringing attention to your breath. If you sat listening to the radio in the car, if you wherever
absolutely.
it might be.
There's some really important tips that go along with that, which Sakti touched on. So it's really good to have a straight back. You can sit on a chair, you can sit cross-legged. You don't have to sit cross-legged, do you? But sitting on the chair, make sure your back's straight, shoulders are rolled back, and allow your hands to relax by the side of the body. And you could relax your tummy. Just let the tummy relax. And then, as Sakti says, just observe your breathing. Allow your attention to come to your breath. Just observe the inhalation and the exhalation. Just watch the breath. I liken this to watching clouds go across a blue sky, or perhaps bubbles floating up in the air. And this is just, as Sakti says, a few seconds of this can be powerful. I'm a bit obsessed about the evidence, because I don't like telling people to do things or to try things out unless I know they work. So I've strapped on a blood pressure monitor, I've got heart rate variability straps, and the evidence, personally for me, the N=1 evidence is really compelling. My heart rate drops, I become much calmer. So as soon as the pulse and the heart rate and the respiration drop, I know that I'm accessing the parasympathetic nervous system. As Sakti said, that brings us a whole range of potential and possibility in terms of our health and well-being. It just relaxes us for starters. But in the long term, if we're doing this over time, is that kind of reducing our risk of kind of like a stress-related illness? I think so. And it's there, it's portable. We can do this wherever we are. As Dave said, even in the car. It's amazing. You can just tap into that wherever you are. I've been known to do this in the supermarket queue when there were queues.
Dave, is there anything, Dave, that you want to come in with before I move on to our next point?
Just one very quick thing, which and I think it's really nice that the 2 points we've just talked about, think about the breath as the way David said it, the in breath is the accelerant and the out breath is the brake. Now, we talked about all the extra stresses in life at the minute, and the thing is that's because we've got our foot on that accelerator the entire time. And there's an expression which I like to use is you can't just breathe in 100% of the time. At some point you have to breathe out. Yes. And we understand that with our breath, right? And it's the same with our work. If I understand that most people put their foot on the accelerator all the time because they want to go fast. Now, if you go fast all the time, you burn out the car. Like, if you want to go far, you take breaks. The same as physical exercise. You know, Sam does a ton of ultra running and stuff. He does do it every single day, so he's an exception to the rule. But you have to have your rest days. He's not getting stronger just by being out there and pounding through the miles. He's putting the miles in and then relaxing. And the same is true when we're trying to achieve anything in work, anything in relationships. You don't just want to be 100% accelerator all the time. We want to take that time off. And funnily enough, the best way to stop feeling guilty about taking that time off is to understand that that time off is actually going to make you reach your goals faster and better than actually just plowing ahead and just accelerating 100% of the time.
One of the things that you just sparked a really great reflection for me, which is one of the great awarenesses I had was we all have to-do lists, I think. Everyone has a kind of list of things to do or a schedule. And it's so important to schedule in or put on the to-do list that time out, that walk, that just go out in the fresh air, to notice what's going on in your surroundings, to look at the flowers. What's that phrase? Taste the coffee. Actually, it sounds really crazy, but put it in a little bit of a schedule to say, oh, I've got this meeting, I've got that meeting, or I'm on the ward, I'm in A&E, I've got a break. I'm going to just go and decompress somewhere, and I'm going to build that into the schedule.
I found that what worked for me was when I tried to incorporate meditation into my own life. I read a book called Atomic Habits, and it talks about attaching a new habit to an already formed one. So what I found was trying to introduce meditation into my life. It was after my morning coffee in the morning. Just literally every morning I would have a black coffee, and then I would just do 1 minute of meditation. And it was just easy to slot it into my day rather than thinking, oh, I need to pencil this amount of time out in my day to try and fit it in. And it worked. You know, it's something that I do on a regular basis now.
Yeah, no, you just reminded me of something else, which is, you know, talking about habits, you know, breathing, you know, it's not even, it's there to access. You don't even need to develop a new habit. You just need to notice it. And I mean, this is not just for our own self. You start without noticing the birds, we wouldn't have invented airplanes. Yeah. Taking notice for me actually brings new insights, new knowledge. So it's not just for our own self and being selfish, especially if you work in the health and care sector. It's about also making a difference. So taking notice with yourself not only helps you, but it enables us, it prepares us to take notice of other things around us and how connected they are, and maybe noticing new patterns. Maybe there is something that we can discover to improve the way we develop services or new inventions. So I think that the potential to, even with a simple taking notice of your own breath, is such a long list. And I think we probably underestimate this in terms of the importance of that. And that's been lost in material. Sort of, we've been constantly bombarded with new stimuli all around. And sometimes it's really better to just close our eyes and just go inwards. Thinking about the COVID-7 habits, which you said, there's quite a lot of in there, isn't there, about how do you go from being dependent to independent to interdependent amongst us. I think there is an intra-dependent aspect, which is going inside. I think that we often overlook. It's very, very important we pay a little bit of attention to that, to untap that energy.
Definitely.
So there's
Sorry, David, go on.
Yeah. So there's two tricks here, aren't there? There's the one about the external noticing, and I love your example of the wind, the birds, the flowers. Now it's spring, the lambs in the field. Actually, there's some wonderful literature out there about people who've gone on walks in towns, in urban areas, and they've gone with an architect, and the architects showed them things that they never saw before. Or they've gone with a dog walker, and the dog actually does the walk, and they experience things in a very different way. So sometimes, even if you're in an urban area and you're going on your usual walk around the block, see it with a different pair of eyes, you know, as the architect, as the dog walker, as the birder, as the historian. So that's the external thing. Sakt is absolutely right to say about the internal look and internal reflection, because for me that there's a stillness in that you can access, and I think that's really, really important.
Would you say that mobile phones distract us as well then? Because obviously you spoke about, you know, going around your local area, whether that's urban or rural, taking it in from a different perspective. Do you think that mobile phones distract people doing that? Would you advise them to sort of put it down, keep it at home while you go on a walk? Or yeah.
It's pernicious. I'm as well as yoga, I'm fascinated with our posture, because and we're all sitting down. I've got a standing desk here, but I thought I'd sit down for this. The problem with this is that we do this, don't we? So it's not just a distraction, it's actually affecting our musculoskeletal system. So back to Sakti's point about yoga, a bit of stretching that comes with yoga can really help with that. But yeah, this is pernicious. If we could switch off from that occasionally, I think that would be a great thing. It has its benefits, but yeah, it's calling out to us a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. Right, so the next point, navigating the individual, the social and the societal. David or Sakti, do you want to come in there? I know this was your point, David, so do you want to start in regards to reading behind that?
I think this is more about sort of what Sakti's talked about this kind of interdependence and intradependence. So we can't deny that there's a big myth about yoga, I think, that people go off into the cave and meditate and they remove themselves from society and you don't have anything, you're pure, you don't have any connections. But actually that's not absolutely the way it is, because in my eyes, if you can be calm and relaxed and integral and happy and at ease in the crowd on a Zoom video conference, that's thumbs up. If you go to, there's a great story I heard about people going to the cave, meditating, and then coming back down to the crowd probably in Delhi or wherever it is, and actually, I'm getting all this noise and I can't cope. That's not a win in my book. Actually, what we should be seeking is, when we're in A&E, finding that presence of awareness. When we're on a Zoom conference, settling in our bodies and finding our breath and attending to the moment. So what Sakti was saying was really important about sort of how we start with that, and I hope I got this right, this kind of connection with ourself through kind of inward looking, through breath, through attending to one object. So lots of yoga practices talk about just focusing on one object. I've got a Rubik cube here, actually. I have this by my desk and I just attend to that. It's crazy, I can't do it. But actually, anything, just one focus. We talk about candle visual, looking at a candle. But then there's this thing about sort of observing how we are, how we're connected with ourselves. And we've talked a lot about the self, and I think a lot of people might be quite afraid of that, because there's a real cultural thing about ego. What we're talking about here is not selfishness. We're talking about, and I don't know if this is the right word, but selfing. It's kind of like nurturing ourselves. So focusing on our personal sense of self, and then gradually expanding. I think about this as concentric circles. So starting with ourselves, then our family, then our friends, then our neighborhood, then, wider and wider. And I think, Sakti, you've talked about the kind of societal responsibilities that we have.
Yeah. No, I think the point, sorry, Sam, I couldn't hear you well before. What we were chatting earlier was, again, saying with the taking notice thing, even during the pandemic, how we are being affected is not just what we do as our own self, but what other people do as well. Wearing masks is a good example, or physical distancing, but also nature. I'm sure we'll find out at some point how this all began and how close, is it because we were so close to the nature and destroying them, and therefore the disease spread from the animals to human beings, or for that matter, the seasonal variations and how the seasons affect our health. So we were just chatting before about taking notice of not just your own self, and by that we don't mean just the mental self, but also the physical self and the various, physical body, but also the rest of the society, and how even a cup of coffee, how many other hands have played a role in bringing that cup of coffee to our table, and just noticing that and being grateful for how we collectively together make it work as a human society is what we were chatting earlier about, taking notice of just not yourself, but also people around you and the role that they play in your well-being, in your happiness, as well as taking notice of the nature.
Yeah. There's something, David, that I'd just like to touch on as well. You mentioned about trying to take notice or focusing on one thing. For example, you mentioned the candle, just trying to focus directly on that candle. So to David or Sakti, if I'm trying to focus on one thing, for example, and I'm trying to focus on this call, but I have loads of different thoughts popping in my mind, what exactly should I do with those thoughts? How do I let them pass by?
This is absolutely the thing that dominates a lot of my classes. I think as human beings, we're random thought generators. I think that's a survival thing from a long time ago. Thoughts just whirl. And this thing is natural, it's human. So the idea that we can look at a flower, we can look at a candle and focus on that, we're going to find that the thoughts do arise. They kind of, that's the nature of who we are and what we are. We can gradually work on this. So the first thing I like to think about is what we've talked about. Focus and breathe. So you're focusing on the candle or on the flower or on the Rubik Cube, and attend to your posture, attend to your positioning, attend to your breathing. You can actually do both. You can have a focus on your breath and on that object, and then gradually you settle the mind. The mind begins to settle. The random thought generator is pernicious. So there's a trick that I think is useful. And we, in the science that Sakti talked about earlier, we talk about something called metacognition. I think of this as thinking about thinking. So there's a part of us behind our thoughts that's the true us, the real us, the authentic us. And we can observe our thoughts, we can watch them. So for some people, if the thoughts are really pernicious, and loads of people ruminate, fix on thoughts, we're addicted to thoughts. We haven't talked about addiction, but I think society is addicted on thinking. I'm not saying we should go around with empty minds, but the thinking I'm talking about is the rumination. So if you've got a random thought generator and you're thinking, I'm going to go and look at a candle, and actually you're looking at the candle and suddenly up pops, oh, I should have done the shopping. Oh, I could do this. I should have done that. I might have done that. Why did my dad treat me like that? What's going on with the dog? Why is the dog laughing? Why is the dog barking? Oh, I can hear the refuse collectors outside. That's natural. That's human. We've got to be kind to ourselves and accept that this is how we are. But actually, I think one of the things we can do is actually shift our attention to the thoughts, but allow them to, and in my practice, we talk about thoughts arise and thoughts disappear. And what I'd like people to think about is this meditational practice, which is, where do thoughts come from and where do thoughts go? And as you watch them just come and go, don't fix on them. This is the addiction. We see a thought and we think, oh, the dog's barking, maybe the dog needs feeding, maybe I ought to go and feed the dog. Should I have bought a dog in the first place? That's that's how it works, I think. So actually, rather than that, we say the dog's barking and let the thought just drift off. Now, it may be that you the postman has delivered some post. Maybe I've won a prize, maybe it's in the post. Actually, let the thought just drift. So it's allowing these thoughts to arise and allowing them to drift off. And if that's a struggle, and the spirit of inquiry is, where do those thoughts come from and where do they go? And we begin to, and Sakti, I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit here, but I think that's an interesting practice to explore.
Absolutely.
Sakti, say anything after that?
I wouldn't go any further in detail because I think I'm conscious of time. But a couple of things which might be helpful is, you're sitting, you can't control thoughts. You can let it go, or you can say to yourself, well, I am actually sitting quiet, noticing my breath. The thoughts might arise, but I'm saying to myself, okay, go back to the breath. I mean, that way, the thoughts go and the calmness arrives. But there are things that we can't get rid of, right? So if there are thoughts, we do need to sit down with the thoughts and understand where that has come from and what does it actually mean, but without letting our meditation or whatever contemplative practices we're doing, without letting those thoughts affecting that particular moment. So we stay in the moment and then we actually intentionally understand our thoughts maybe at another time and do something with it, because it is very, very difficult to control thoughts.
Yeah.
But we can we can understand it. And as they say, well, in my mother tongue, you try and control your thoughts, it comes back again, but you try and understand the thoughts, you get a conclusion, or you get new insights.
There is one thing that I would add to this is that our senses are very strong. So the taste, the smell, the visual senses, the hearing. So sometimes if we've got really persistent rumination going on, fixing on one sense. So Sakti talked about tasting the coffee. So doing start with 10 seconds, then 20, then 30, but start with how does the coffee taste? Really and we hear about mindfulness all the time, but actually this is about a focus on the coffee, on the taste. And similarly with smells, you could do this with perfume, you could do this with the candle, with a flower, you could do it with sound. So we probably haven't got time to talk about mantra, but you could actually, you know what? I think a lot of people do this unconsciously. They sing songs, and singing a song helps you fix your mind.
You can give us one, David, if you want. We don't mind. So I think just for everyone watching, if you do have any questions, please do start to put them in the chat box now. The next point that we were going to talk about, I think we have touched on this already, the power of noticing and an attention revolution. David, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think there's this confusion again about kind of like you let the mind empty. The point about meditation is about stilling the mind to enable you to attend to things that are important. So when we talk about the random thought generator, I think what's really important here, and the attention revolution, is attending to those thoughts that are useful, those thoughts that are helpful, and those thoughts that are important. I don't know about anyone else. It could just be me, but I doubt it. I've got a lot of random thoughts that are completely rubbish. And if I analyze them, like Sakti has described, what was that all about? So
it's
this
not
ability,
just you.
the ability to sift through the thoughts and say, right, that thought is important, and attend to it is actually, I hate to say this, but it's a useful productivity tool. We can be more productive because we can be more able to concentrate on the things that matter. So I think that's what I'm saying about an attention revolution, allowing ourselves to strengthen that ability to concentrate, focus, and attend to things that are important.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Sakti?
Not particularly. It's easy to confuse being mindful and being full of thoughts in your mind and having an open mind. I think these are all linked but quite often confused, but it can be learned so quickly and easily as well. And that's the thing that's one of the things that drives me in sharing some of these tips. So mind is a wonderful thing. I tend to think about mind as an inbuilt navigation device. So it depends, what we program that for and whether we are keeping it on or not, and that's in our hands.
Yeah. Dave, do you want to come into with any questions before we go into the last point?
No, I'm happy to keep quiet and give the rest of you the space to talk about it, because I'm really enjoying just consuming this today. So,
right. So the last point is basically just to touch on tools in regards to how people can help themselves. So, to either of yourselves to start, what can people do to get started with this?
Okay, I'll start off. Clearly, there are so many different ways we can do to take notice. But broadly speaking, there are three things one can start with. One is just taking notice of things around us. Wherever we are, just look around. Maybe a person, maybe a plant, maybe something on your desk. And just spend a bit of time about just noticing that and what other people's roles might be in that thing to come to you. Or just be in the moment and enjoy that, watching the bird, or go for a walk. That's the second way of taking notice. Walking is so much ubiquitous, and you just need to step out of the door, and there is quite a bit of nature around us. Especially in our county, in Lancashire. So taking a walk, being with friends. Oh no, we can't do that now in the lockdown, but speaking to someone. And then the third one really is internal, taking notice of your own self. Some gentle stretches, some gentle, breathing practices. These are the little things we can do. It doesn't have to be to have been on a course and read a long book or having a degree to take notice. There are some simple things we can do, and it does work. And I'm saying this with my personal experience as well as looking at various evidence.
Perfect. And David, have you got any advice for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to build on what Sakti said. So alongside the walk and the noticing nature, I think there's a practice which is called gratitude practice. So just thinking about what you're personally grateful for. This could be in the morning over the coffee, as Sam has just touched on. You could do this as kind of like two ends of a bookcase. You could have a morning gratitude and an evening gratitude to reflect on the day. I don't know, but I think an awful lot of people don't appreciate how good they are. So being grateful for your achievements is actually a bit of a twist. But actually, if you've been on the ward helping a patient feel better about themselves, that's an amazing thing. That's a real gift, I think, to that individual. And taking time out just to reflect on that and sitting, as Sakti said, quietly, calmly, and just relaxing and enabling. It's a bit like the classic TV thing where a kid walks in, isn't it? So that's the first thing. Gratitude is really important. The second one is about kindness. And I think being kind to yourself is really important. And these aren't, as Sakti said, we're not talking about a 2-hour practice on a mat. This is just taking a little bit of time out to reflect on, if you beat yourself up, and I think everyone beats themselves up. I'm sure they do. And again, Dave, it's not just me, is it?
It's definitely not just you. And I will add something on that in a minute, but carry on.
So just being kind to yourself. If you've messed up, if you've made a mistake, if you've said something that was hurtful, or if you've done something silly, own it. That's really important. But also just be kind and accept you're human. And I think that's really important. So kindness. And then the other one, which I think links to Sakti's point about nature walking, is I think there's different variations on this, but I call it the 3 things. As I go out for a walk, I just observe 3 things. So one thing about myself, one thing about nature, and one thing about sort of life or a thought that comes up. And that's something you can kind of adopt. 3 things of your day, 3 good things in your day, which is linked to gratitude.
I really like the one on gratitude, Dave, because I think quite often, especially with social media, you compare your lives to other people's and you start thinking, I want this, I want that. And you actually forget to appreciate what you already have. And, for me personally, I do think about like 3 things I'm grateful for every day, whether that's my cup of coffee, whether that's kissing my wife or my daughter before I go to work. Because sometimes you can fail to appreciate what's in front of you because you can start being fixated on what you want next. And actually what we have, or for example, what I have as an individual, is far more than what other people have got, in certain environments or countries or whatever. And that's something that has really helped my mental health, definitely focus on what I do have.
Absolutely. And the thing about kindness, a lot of people will feel, well, I can't be kind to myself, or, that feels really, but actually, here's a question for everyone, including myself. How can you be kind to anyone else or anything else if you can't be kind to yourself? And giving yourself a bit of slack, giving yourself some space and time to accept that you're human and accept that you're going to mess up. But actually, generally speaking, most people are really decent people.
Yeah.
And if you start on that and are kind to yourself, you can't go too far wrong.
That was the thing that I wanted to touch on, because I think I understand why most people can't be kind to themselves. And it's because we've been brought up being like the idea of, oh, he loves himself, being kind of like a negative projection. We get told, be humble, don't be a show-off, don't brag, when we're kids. And unfortunately, instead of seeing a rich kind of tapestry of different ways we can be good to ourselves, we see, don't brag, and then we see self-deprecation, and we see nothing in between. So if we're not bragging, we're beating ourselves up, which is why I kind of said, we have an expression that we use a lot on here, which is we don't guilt ourselves into greatness, because beating ourselves up about things actually makes us feel worse, which actually leads back to the things that we're doing to deal with the fact that we feel bad. And that's the thing I'll say to people, right? Big yourself up, don't beat yourself up. So I'm doing very brief with the chat over there, but I threw a little dab emoji in, which is one of them. And I actually, when kids made those popular about 5 years ago, a lot of people hate it, and I'm like, you know what? I love it, because usually it was thrown after something they'd done that they thought was cool. So they, kicked a ball into a cup the opposite side of the room, and it's like, yeah, I'm proud of myself for doing that. And it's like actually taking that little time to celebrate in yourself. And it feels really weird at first. It might not be a full-on dab for some people. The little success kid meme might be all that people. I love the 80s reach and grab. I'm a child of the 80s, so I love that. Or I like doing a happy dance, and Sam knows this because he's made me dance in front of school kids before now. But I like literally celebrating in what you've done. But going back to something that Sam said a minute ago, when he said, well, comparing to other people does nothing work, and comparing to ourselves can be a bit problematic as well sometimes. But what I would say is, we're all probably out there striving for something, and the things that we're achieving now are probably things that we didn't think we could even do. The things that we have in our lives right now are the things that we wanted 5 years ago. And really, it's not what you have, it's what you appreciate. If you continue to go on that hedonic treadmill and just continue to try and strive for the next thing, which is fine, providing that you're taking a bit of time to reflect and say, I'm proud, and I'm as guilty as this as anybody else. Like when Sam does long distance runs, or when I've done them, it's like, right, well, we've got to go further than that. I interviewed 26 people consecutively about mental health a week ago, called the Mental Health Marathon, and my brain for the last week and a half has been, how can I go bigger than that? I've got to do 52 next time. I've got to stay up for 3 days to do this next time. And it's like, no, Dave, just take a bit of time. Give yourself that little, the 80s reach and grab. Yeah. Be proud of what you've done, and stop striving for a second, because, you can't breathe in all the time.
Absolutely. And it is about, if you're not looking after yourselves, who do you think will look after you? Or who do you think you can look after? Yeah. So I think we're so closely knit as a human society, but yet, we've got to do our part in looking after ourselves, not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally. And there are, simple things that we can all do, like we've been discussing in the last hour, that really does make a difference.
Definitely. Is there any questions, Dave? We've got a couple of minutes left.
I've literally just muted myself so I could reply to some as well. There's some comments. What Gary Marsden just said would be good to introduce these ideas and practices to young people in schools, particularly during the current pandemic. If you actually go through the Family Hour playlist, so this is the Staff Hour, which is the first episode of that. But in the Family Hour, we did, I think it was called Mindfulness. We did a whole hour on mindfulness, and we do introduce these things to that. And there's a video resource there, which is actually really good.
Within the Change Talk School program as well, that's something that we do educate. We teach on positive coping strategies to schools. And what me and Dave are doing alongside other partners as well is like a trainer-trainer model. So there's going to be loads of lessons that are going to be given to school staff to deliver to the pupils as well, all across the county, which is really exciting. Mostly
it's just comments and stuff. I don't think there's any questions. Just Jackie Williams said, finding the discussion really helpful and interesting. The notion of attending is a really useful one. Darcy from the comms team at the Trust said, what David has said has been really interesting to listen to. I love that we're doing this for our staff. Richard Whitehead said, and I think this is really important, a lot of us will probably be guilty of this, I have realised that I have a working lunch. Often I have eaten my food without noticing while sending emails or similar. I am going to take notice of my lunch today and savour each mouthful. Touching on that and something that David said before about attaching to our senses, your coffee can, with food, you can attach to pretty much every sense except for sound. Unless you're doing chocolate, snap it next to your ear, it's brilliant. But if let's just imagine this is a nice coffee mug. Get yourself a coffee mug that's textured, because then you can attach to the feeling there as well. The smell of coffee, you can I don't think there's a video anywhere on my page about mindful eating and mindful drinking. I've done it on Instagram before, but it's one of the best experiences because you end up appreciating that cup of coffee so much more. like you can smell it, you can connect to it, you can connect to like the texture of it in your mouth, the warmth of it, the warmth through your hands. So you with that, you get taste, you get smell. You don't get sound on a cup of coffee unless you want the sound of pouring the coffee into the mug, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Dave, I'm just wondering if I could come in there, because
absolutely.
One of the things that I notice an awful lot, we do what's called the raisin meditation when I had classes, and it's kind of like the feel of a raisin, the smell of it, the taste of it. What we noticed is that people, when they slow down, they start dribbling.
That'd be me.
It's just a raisin.
Yeah.
And then a couple of people, they ate it without thinking, and it's like, oh, can I have another raisin?
Yeah.
But that was a great insight into kind of like when you do attend to things, when you are mindful, when you totally focus, you begin to slow things down, you begin to appreciate things, and you get away from that addiction cycle that we've all got to a certain degree.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that expression I used before, which is it's not what we have, it's what we appreciate. It's you can like what I've recovered from an eating disorder. So I had binge eating disorder and non-purge bulimia as a child, and I would literally plow through food, and I'd probably love the first taste, but by the time I'm at the end of the pack of biscuits or the end of the multi-bag of crisps or whatever it is, I'm not even tasting that or enjoying it anymore. And the enjoyment and the stress relief that I'm craving, I'm not actually getting. And mindful eating was one of the big practices that actually helped me to overcome that, because it's like, right, okay, one square of chocolate, like I'm going to make this thing last, and that's where the snap one came from. And a little bonus tip: smell the chocolate, then snap it, and then smell the snap. It unleashes like a different aroma, and this is just a way. But you can totally and utterly bring mindfulness to everything. Like listen to your favorite piece of music and try and pick out what all the different instruments are doing. It makes that piece of music so much better. And you know, I won't go down other ways you can do it, but let's just call it physical connection. Do that mindfully. That's like brings a lot more attention to it.
I think
carry on with the comments.
I think because we've gone over 11 o'clock, I know people have got to go. If anyone does have any questions, then you can email me on sam.tyrer, Tyrer, @lscft.nhs.uk, and I can also forward your questions on to David and Sakti as well. So just to sort of round it up, a huge thank you to David and Sakti for joining us today. I found this really informative personally, so thank you very much to your insights. Really, really enjoyed this webinar. Just to end, and either of you can come in, what is the best thing for people to do once this is finished? Would you advise people just to take 30 seconds just to practice some of these breathing techniques straight away?
Sakti, do you want to?
I'd quite like to think that people can, you can learn different types of breathing techniques and, then counts of inhalation, exhalation, but we can get onto that later. But even if you can have straight back, like David was saying, relax your body, keep your back straight and head straight. Before you do anything or after you've done something, just notice your breath for at least even 30 seconds would be my one take-home tip. And I'm going to encourage that in my teams as well.
So one take-home tip for me, which is just a mental thing, is this notion that the mind is serviceable. You can put the mind into service, so you can sift between the thoughts that are not helpful and the thoughts that are helpful.
Perfect. And I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for tuning in for the first episode of the Mental Health Staff Hour. We are coming back next week at the same time. I will send a new link out, and next Thursday's focus is adapting to change. So thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.